Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Gennady Stolyarov II. I am the chairman of the United States Transhumanist Party. We are here gathered for my Second Enlightenment Salon with Dr. Bill Andrews, Bobby Ridge, and Scott Jurgens. Hopefully we will have an enlightening conversation on a wide range of issues. So, Bill, I wanted to first ask you about your recent trip to Istanbul. It looks to me like you were treated as a celebrity over there.
Yeah, no, I got a lot of attention. I was speaking at the World Aesthetic Congress, and I talked about telomeres, and I got a lot of press before and after. I was in all the newspapers and all the magazines, and other news stories got me on things. But the big news was actually that a company called Libella Gene Therapeutics, it's Libella, they had licensed our technology for doing gene therapy, using gene therapy to deliver telomerase to human cells. They'd licensed it from us, and just about 4 days before I spoke at that Congress, Libella announced that they had gotten regulatory approval from Cartagena, Colombia, to actually begin phase 1 clinical studies. And so that was pretty exciting news. Now anybody can go to libellagenetherapeutics.com and follow what's going on. I'm excited because after almost 30 years of research in this area, I had finally got the potential of actually seeing that my research could actually reverse aging. Or maybe it won't, we'll find out. But if it doesn't, make us ask a bunch of questions as to why not, and then we can fix those. But I'm so glad that we're actually going to now get an opportunity to see it tested. And it's research. People can sign up to participate in it, but it's research. They have to do it at their own risk. Phase 1 clinical studies are typically risky because they're usually based on dose studies to find out what doses are best to use. But it's just the fact that people are going to get treated with this, I think is really exciting.
Yes, indeed, it is quite exciting. And from what I have read, the trial is open to up to 50 patients, and the organizers have said they may start seeing results either positive or negative within about 3 months.
3 months after they started. That first, I know that the clinical study actually began about 4 days ago. But the beginning part of it is mostly candidate screening and baseline studies with the plans of actually treating the first patient in about 4 months from now. Mm-hmm. So nobody knows how long it's going to take, but the best guesses, including my best guess, is that maybe we'll see something in 3 months. But it's a guess. I mean, maybe we'll see something in 2 days. Maybe we'll see something in 3 years. We don't know. It's all research. We're venturing into the unknown, and whenever you venture into the unknown, you can't. There's no way to know what to expect.
Yes. So it seems like we are indeed entering into this age where commercial entities are becoming increasingly interested in combating these age-old diseases like Alzheimer's and pursuing clinical trials that could result in increasing longevity. And this seems to be a very recent shift in the preferences of these entities. Could you perhaps shed some light on what has transpired in the past few years to bring about this change?
Actually, I'm not certain I agree with you. My company, and even my previous company, Geron Corporation, has been interested in this for 30 years. I think the thing that's actually bringing it to the forefront right now is that research is getting to the point where things can actually be tested. And so there's, like for instance, metformin is recently in a clinical study to see if it affects human aging. Then there's also the parabiosis, which is young blood into old people, and also senolytics, which is actually killing off senescent cells. And I'm interested in seeing how all those things work. And I have my doubts and et cetera, but who knows? We won't know until somebody actually tries, but these things are at the level where people can actually start testing. And, I think, in answering your question further, one big thing, and I know this is true for myself, one big thing that has changed is that the people like me and others that have been focused on this for so long are now getting old, and we're getting impatient. And so we are finding ways to actually get some of this work done so that we can still benefit from it. But I know that that's been a driving force, because I used to think, well, I got plenty of time. But when I turned 65, I just thought, maybe I don't have plenty of time anymore. Maybe I gotta start doing something quickly if I'm gonna benefit from it.
So what are some of the ways to accelerate this research that you think would be plausible within the next decade? Because while I'm not 65, I am 30, and I am beginning to be a bit concerned myself.
Yeah, well, there's only one problem, and that's funding. That's everybody who's doing research in this area. The reason why they're so public about it and talking about it and advertising in the news and press releases and stuff like that is because they need funding to do this work. That's the big obstacle. Me and Aubrey de Grey have been saying that for years. Is the thing that's slowing down research on curing aging isn't that we don't know what we're doing. It is that we don't have the funding to do what we know how to do. And so that's held things up. I mean, the global financial crisis of 2008 was a big, big problem for the cure for aging. I mean, before 2008, I had plenty of research funding, but then after 2008, it became very hard to find investors. And so as a result, I personally had to start putting some of our old discoveries, licensing them out to other companies so that they could actually put them on the market, and we would get a royalty that would fund our research. But that hasn't gone nearly as well as the investment environment was prior to 2008. But it's kept us going, and we're moving forward doing that. But really, we're still, even though we are bringing in funding, it helps keep us alive, it's not enough to do all the research that we're doing, that we need to do.
So I think this is a question for everybody. What can be done to increase public support so that the funding for life extension research would be forthcoming? Because there is a lot of public enthusiasm for curing particular diseases. I participated in 2 running races in Reno earlier this year. One was the heart and stroke run that raised awareness for diseases of the heart as well as stroke, and then the other was the Race for the Cure that is sponsored by the Susan G. Komen Foundation, focused on breast cancer. So those 2 sets of illnesses have a tremendous constituency of individuals who have been affected by them, whose relatives have been affected by them, and they're very passionate about fighting those diseases and raising funds. But biological aging or senescence affects all of us, and we all know people who have succumbed to them. So the first question would be how to get people as passionate about that as they are about heart disease or stroke or breast cancer. And the second question is, what would be some of the principal obstacles that you see to raising that awareness from which funding would be forthcoming?
I think great events like Bill and you participate in are like RadFest. Doing events like that should be a great way of publicizing this. And I have a feeling that in the next 5-10 years, this will be just a huge phenomenon. People won't be able to, it'll just be in everyone's face because the advancements in science and technology will just be so large. It's self-driving cars and.
No, I said that 30 years ago.
Yeah.
5 years from now, everything will be changed, but it hasn't.
Yeah. But you see things like with stem cells and organ transplants. I see this convergence of all these different areas, and but yeah, that'd be really too bad to not see much of a change. Definitely more government assistance would be definitely helpful. You see how much the handful of billionaires and millionaires that have participated in this, and just imagine all the money the government has and how much they can really accelerate this.
I think the big problem with why anti-aging research isn't as well funded as cancer research and heart disease research is the large number of charlatans in the field of anti-aging, and that's what we've got to find some way to eliminate the charlatans, because that gives the whole field of anti-aging a perception. People's perception of it is that it's not real. Anybody in the field of anti-aging is just like in the Old West, and somebody standing on a street corner saying, "Here's Dr. So-and-so's ointment that cures everything," and it was just really water, or as the term is used, snake oil. And so a lot of people, and there's no field I know of that has more quacks and charlatans than anti-aging. So I think that's why a lot of people are leery about actually doing something, investing in stuff like that. So getting rid of those charlatans, I think, would, and actually getting some really good data where we actually do reverse aging will waken people up to the fact that it can be done. Because right now I think they think it's just a science fiction, and everybody who says it can be done is just a charlatan.
And I agree with you on both of those points, Bill. It's interesting that in the anti-aging field, the quacks actually came first, and the legitimate science only arrived relatively recently on a historical scale, so in the past several decades. But the dream of overcoming mortality has been with humankind ever since humans were aware that they were mortal. And of course, some unscrupulous individuals have tried to exploit that dream and sell false promises. Now, with regard to data that convincingly shows the reversal of biological aging, I think perhaps that is the difference between where anti-aging research is now and where the fight against heart disease or breast cancer is now, because there are proven reliable ways to reduce the risk of heart disease. Mortality from heart disease has fallen, I think, by about a factor of 4 in terms of the mortality rate since the 1950s. And in terms of breast cancer, there is now more granular identification of the types of breast cancer. It turns out there's not just one disease called breast cancer. There are actually many different varieties of it, and the survival rates have been increasing. So maybe people see this progress, they see hope, and they're willing to support the research that would further that hope. So perhaps the trial for Libella Therapeutics or other trials that are up and coming, if they show successful results, will motivate more people to take an interest in this area.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, it's still important, even if this trial does work, it's still important that research comes along or funding comes along to help the research, because this study with the gene therapy is so expensive. It's in my opinion, it's just going to be a proof of concept that it works, but it's not going to be affordable by people. It's just like, for instance, for us to produce enough of the gene therapy to treat one person once costs us $1.2 million. So it's not going to be a cheap thing. It's not going to be the end all to aging and declining health.
I think there's an incorrect definition of aging too that a lot of people hold. They think they're going to be decrepit for like another 100 years, or
that's why I always say reverse aging and declining health. Because for some reason, people have watched too many movies. There's not an anti-aging scientist on the planet that wants to make us old and unhealthy and just live longer. It's everybody's definition of anti-aging who's doing research is to make people healthier longer, and that's the key.
Yes, indeed. So, Bobby, you have been working on a paper on philosophy of science, and it is about to be published in a philosophy journal. So could you please tell us about your work?
So the title of the paper is a science-based species, and I kind of got it from the science-based medicine. You see Dr. Google, right? He's a huge advocate of that. And all these advances is really from science. It's not from logic or religion or any other demographic. You can say technology and mathematics and engineering, but as actual demarcations. But I would say that they're they should be viewed as holistic and still be considered under the umbrella of sciences. The only problem I have is trying to demarcate, figure out the demarcation between logic and science. Logic seems like a very real phenomenon. But what it comes down to, my hypothesis is that the scientific method is particularly experimentation, is the only reliable method that we know of to determine truth. And everything else is just hypotheses and questions. And experimentation is the only way to really determine whether the hypothesis is correct or not, or falsified or failed to be falsified.
So in terms of the role of logic, it would seem to me that logic is an integral component of the scientific process, because even if you have, say, an empirical observation that gives you data that might establish certain facts of reality, you would need to use deductive logic to arrive at other insights from that data. So wouldn't you say that science is inextricably connected with logic, just as it's inextricably connected with mathematics?
Yeah.
Because mathematics provides the tools to analyze the empirical observation.
Yeah, and that's what I guess my greatest fear is. That would kind of like disprove my paper. That logic is like a separate entity, but if it's connected, then that would be a lot better for me. And just imagine if we have such a handful of scientists, researchers and developers. Just imagine if it was tripled, we would be accelerating much faster than we are now. Just look at the history of science in the last 400 years, and we've advanced so much. And we could have advanced way more if there wasn't so many hindrances, so many people oppressing science or just not practicing it in general. Yeah.
So you raise an interesting set of questions, though, about the bottlenecks to scientific advancement, because in prior eras there were a lot of dogmas and a lot of efforts to persecute scientists who simply tried to achieve an accurate understanding of the natural world. If we look back at what happened to Giordano Bruno, who was burnt at the stake, or Galileo, who was...
Lucky we weren't born then.
Yes, indeed. Who was forced to recant his views about a heliocentric solar system in order to preserve his life. And Copernicus, who didn't publish his views about the heliocentric solar system until his death, because he knew what sort of response that would elicit. We've gone from that to an environment where we have largely free speech, and we are able to discuss scientific ideas without fear of persecution. There are large research institutions that perform science largely in accord with the scientific method. And yet there are still certain bottlenecks, and those bottlenecks, I think, do affect the rate of progress. I wonder if you could comment on what you think the predominant obstacles in our time would be.
So I think science needs to be an integral part of society, and can politicians really deny uncontroversial scientific results? Who aren't scientists, who haven't read the literature, are we allowed to say that we shouldn't put resources in global warming or deny the law of gravity? It seems to be something that we just cannot deny unless you have evidence against it, which is still science. A lot of scientists will say like it isn't absolute truth because it's always up for questioning, but that's still science. So you're still using science to, so it's not really an argument against science. And I just think that we really need society to be more conscious of how to conduct experimentation and read papers that are published, and I think that would help out tremendously.
Scott, if you could discuss recent developments in prosthetics and orthotics.
Yeah. Sure, there's, especially with like larger industrial size 3D printing, capability to print sockets for a lot of patients is becoming more and more possibility, but not for a while until it's bit quicker to print out these sockets. Could we do it? But there's a company, I can't remember the name, maybe we can put it in the description perhaps, that offers carbon fiber spools to use to print out these sockets for these prosthetic devices, and that's huge, because that's such a great lightweight material, and it's used now for prosthetic sockets. And the reason for 3D printing as a great option for prosthesis production is the fact that 3D scanning picks up on every nuance and landmark in a patient's residual, in an amputee's residual limb. And I read that the way at least the ones printed with I believe SLS plastic provide a certain amount of like roughness to the socket that kind of helps with at least how the socket grabs onto the limb, and how it kind of communicates with the liner that goes in between the limb and the socket. And there's been reports of people like kind of really finding comfort in even these plastic ones. Yeah, just to see that become a lot more viable as an option as time goes on, as the technology advances, and the prints take a lot less time, is very exciting, because that could potentially like just lower the cost and time it takes for a patient to get a socket, because a patient can go through very many more than just one or two sockets within like a 10-year period. So the ability to just like print it out, and hopefully not too many years down the road, print it out quickly, is very valuable. And it's a great development so far, the carbon fiber printed sockets.
Yes, that sounds like a great development that could greatly enhance patient comfort and the versatility with which these sockets are produced. Thank you for sharing that, Scott.
Thank you.
So, Scott was telling us about recent advances in the creation of sockets for prosthetic recipients, and this is one field of technology where I think the promise of transhumanism is beginning to be realized very quickly. And likewise, if we can combine advances in biotechnology and medicine with advances in prosthetics, artificial limbs, other augmentations, perhaps brain augmentations, then we could have an entirely different paradigm of the human experience, where we are no longer bound by conditions that have historically been considered an inextricable part of human nature. But for instance, if our lifespans could become open-ended and youthful, if losing a limb no longer renders one confined to a sedentary lifestyle, if the human mind can become much more versatile, that, I think, would be the greatest convergence of advances in human history. So I wonder if any of you have any comments about that. Let's start with you, Bobby.
With BCIs?
Brain-computer interfaces would certainly be a part of that.
Yeah, I heard a really great TEDx about BCIs. You always hear people talking about how like we're doing gods and super advanced like technological beings, and definitely it sounds exciting, but you never really know how plausible it is, and how long that would take. But yeah, I'm all for connecting my brain to a computer as long as it works out. There's no like enslavement of mankind or something.
And no technical glitches as well, because
Yeah.
I still experience sporadic internet outages, or in parts of northern Nevada, a lack of connectivity. And I think if we have situations where human organs or human capabilities are connected to a network like that, that network had better be ultra reliable and have many redundancies built in. And I think advances in infrastructure are another area where we need to make rapid progress to make that happen.
And you see, like people that they already have people that can use machines and grab onto things, and or even monkeys can grab onto food and feed themselves or drive themselves around on like a wheelchair. It's connected to their brain. Or they transferred like memories from two mices. One mouse knew how to do a maze, another one didn't, and so they transferred the memories to the mouse that didn't know how to do it, and of course it knew how to do it after they transferred the memory. And then people extrapolate like what that's going to be like, and we're going to share memories. But
I think we're on the threshold of some really big changes occurring, and especially what you were just talking about. But I do see prosthetics playing a really big role, because a lot of the some stuff we're going to want to do with our brains are going to be sending signals to our limbs and stuff like that to be faster, better, stronger, and we're going to have prosthetics that are actually going to have computers inside them that are going to be doing things. I can't even come close to scratching the surface of what all the benefits we're all going to get when this actually becomes a reality. We're going to be creating things that nobody ever thought of. But I can't wait for us to get to that point.
Yes, it'll be the next great era of our civilization. Scott, what are your thoughts on this convergence of technologies?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of computers and the limbs, that's already happening. That's already very widespread. The company Autobot has their sea leg. I hope that's not Oser, not Autobot. They have their sea leg, their knees. It's basically like a microprocessor inside of a knee, and the prosthetist may go in and change the different resistances, just in terms of the amputee's weight. That decides, the amount of kickback it gives to help complete the gait cycle. So yeah, we're already seeing already seeing that there. And in terms of that really popular article about the man with the two myoelectrically controlled arms is pretty wild as well. I was just at a amputee coalition conference back in August, and I played around with the prosthetic hand, and it's just very interesting how they have that how they have it programmed. It was basically had some just a few electrodes, and just
Connected to you?
in terms of
Was it connected to you?
Yeah, just connected to me, and just like in terms of how I moved my hand, right, left, it made a grasp, just different types of behaviors that help people eat or pick things up. So it's already that's exciting. There's just so much more to develop in that, like a lot more nuanced movements.
I think it's going to be a fantastic new thing for amputees, but I think the big market's not going to be the amputees. It's going to be the people that have normal limbs and legs and arms that want enhancements.
Yeah.
That's, I think, where the prosthetics is going to really take over.
Yeah. In the orthotic device industry, there's Exobionics. They're based in Richmond, and I think already right now they have the exoskeleton that allows some paraplegic patients to actually walk.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of talk about warehouse, just general, people who work in warehouses or anything that requires repetitive use and lifting. There's been talks about exoskeletons being used for them as well. So yeah, I mean, in terms of non-invasive procedures, like having someone chop off their arm for better use, I think that's a bit extreme, at least from now on. But yeah, exoskeletons are pretty present and quite in the near future of
I can't see myself ever cutting off my arm, so I can put a better arm on it, but I can see the exoskeleton approach is
yeah.
pretty wonderful.
Yes, I think I'm quite conservative with regard to my own organism, in the sense that my default preference is I would rather avoid doing harm, so I wouldn't do an elective replacement. However, I would happily pursue a functional prosthetic if one of my actual limbs became damaged in some way, and furthermore, for some sort of add-on augmentation, like an exoskeleton or some sort of modular device that could be attached to a limb to improve its capabilities, like improve how much weight it could lift, I would certainly be more than willing to try those kinds of advances.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for that overview, Scott, and I think relating to a point you made previously, Bobby, this is why it's so important to get people interested in science and the scientific method, because the scientific method ultimately brings about these technological advancements that can dramatically alter our experience of life and the possibilities that come with it. So with that, Bill, Bobby, Scott, thank you very much for a most enlightening conversation today. I hope our viewers enjoyed it as well, and please look into the United States Transhumanist Party, because we continually discuss the promise of emerging technologies as well as how to implement them in a manner that benefits as many people as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.